How am I so certain that Bitcoin is going up forever? I asked the question to the normie. Will governments and banksters ever stop printing money? The answer is no. Man, I wish I could tell every single one of my family members, just get a whole Bitcoin. That's all you will ever need for generational wealth. There is going to be such a huge supply shock because we say when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. So eventually when America starts hodling Bitcoin, all the other governments are going to do it. And Trump already gave everybody the green light. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. That Bitcoin is the discovery of digital scarcity, and it's giving the power back to the people. I came across this thing called Bitcoin, and I noticed that it went from $20,000 to $65,000 in a period of a couple months. I'm like, what is this? And I remember from 2018 when I was in the pizzeria, I had heard about it on the TV and I shrugged it off. It was 2018. Man, if I could have bought some Bitcoin there. Bitcoin changed my life in countless ways because I used to be worried and afraid all the time. What if I passed away? What if something happens to me? How are my children going to make a living? Well, Bitcoin is taking care of that for me. Imagine when there's 5 or 10 corporations and nation states, and banks. So eventually everybody's going to want 1 million Bitcoins, but there's only 21 million Bitcoins and I'm not selling. So that's a lot of people like you and me.
It's so fun to talk about that because it's like you have more and more actors that really want to gain more and more Bitcoin, and especially they want to have Bitcoin in their own control. And then it's like, but there are only 21 million at maximum. There's been a loss. So like maybe we can calculate with like 18 million or 15 million, whatever the number is. And you're like, okay, if there's like 5 MicroStrategies, that's already too many. That's already too many MicroStrategies. There can only be one. So the other ones have to fight for a lower amount. So it's at some point, big companies will fight for to get to 100,000 Bitcoin because 1 million is just out of the way. Now companies can still get there, but at some point it's like, oh yeah, you get to 10,000 Bitcoin as a big company, and that's a huge accomplishment. And then think about what it means if you have a whole coin as an individual or as a family.
Do you think that a person on average in Austria, or let's say in Europe, do you think a normal average working Joe in Europe can buy a whole Bitcoin?
No, I seriously don't think so. I don't know the exact numbers. I looked it up once, but if you have, if you go with the average, maybe if they sell everything, but they have to sell their house. If you talk about middle class in Austria, most of them save their life's energy in a house. And most of their houses, almost all of the houses in Austria are worth more than a Bitcoin right now. So they could probably, if they really hustle, if they sell everything for Bitcoin and they really hustle for that, because Austria is a small but on average kind of a good country when you look at the net worth per people. It's also where do you draw the average? But I think the medium, the middle class could realistically maybe still get there if 2025 isn't crazy. So if we are going fast to 200, 300, 400,000, then all of a sudden, forget what I'm just said and say it's no longer possible. And it's already very hard. But I think most people the middle class could still get there. The middle class in people that are older than 30, older than 35, maybe around 40, because they usually have some assets and not relying only on savings.
Right.
But I've met 50, 60-year-old people and their only savings are 10,000 euros in the bank.
Yeah.
They don't get investing, they don't get assets, they don't get, not even talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They don't even get why an ETF is a good idea.
Yeah.
And the ETF is a way better idea than holding it in euros.
Yeah, my daughter brings friends over the house all the time, like dozens of different little girls. They play around, they're outside, go buy ice cream. I mention investing every time I can to them. If it comes up, oh, there comes Bitcoin Gus again, But I tell them because I know that the schools aren't doing it. Yeah, and then they're going to grow up to be that average Joe middle class person in wherever you are. Really, I don't think any schools are doing it, and they're not going to have assets. They're not going, and then the fiat gets severely devalued by the nation states, and that's every nation state. We're very fortunate to live in the West where our money is actually worth something. The euro is a powerhouse, just like the dollar. For people who don't know, the euro is worth more than the dollar, right? So the euro, if you live in Europe, and I'm an European citizen, and I love Europe, and one day I want to retire in Italy, in the Alps near you there, by Austria, by Switzerland. Um, People, I think, if you ask me, people can still get in America to 1 Bitcoin. I wish I knew about, getting to be a whole coiner back in 2018, because then by now my company could have stacked the whole Bitcoin too, which I'm trying to do. That's why I ask you if you think it's possible for a person to stack a whole Bitcoin. Though I personally have it, my company doesn't have it yet. But I wish I could. How do you convince people? Well, there's no convincing them. Eventually, they're going to come to the realization that Bitcoin is the most important, most valued asset and most scarce asset in the world. But how do you make people realize that that's what they should get to immediately, like yesterday?
I just looked it up because I was like, I don't want to say BS on the podcast. And actually, it was right on. According to Google's AI, I think Gemini, it's called the average net wealth of Austrian households. Average is 293,000 euros.
Oh,
So the average household could definitely afford 1 Bitcoin. But the interesting thing is the difference between between average and median. So median is like the middle part. Like, I'm not a statistics expert, but like the average is just like taking everything and dividing by the people, how many people there are, and the median looks at like what is the middle, like what's the point, getting all the numbers on, and what's like the middle number. The median is significantly lower with 128,000. That's right around where Bitcoin sits. I mean, like now Bitcoin sits like at like 90,000, but it's not that far away from it. Right now, most Austrians, so more than 50% of Austrians, could get to 1 Bitcoin if they sell everything they have for Bitcoin, which means a lot already. So I don't know, how is this in the USA? I've never looked it up.
yeah, I'm very surprised, man. Wow, in Austria, the average and medium, even the medium, is above the United States. I think the average salary in America, we're up to 75,000. Sorry, let's see here.
I don't know. I have no clue if that's representative, but like apparently the average net worth of the US household is 1 million.
Oh wow, yeah, I'm not surprised. It says here the average income for the average household in America is $80,000, which makes sense. We're up by a lot. I think 5 years ago it was like $50,000, but there's obviously areas where it's nicer places and more expensive places. But man, I wish I could tell every single one of my family members, just get a whole Bitcoin. That's all you will ever need for generational wealth.
It's super interesting. And the median is actually also very close to where the 1 Bitcoin is. The median is currently at 190,000 US dollar. So that's not that far away. It's like $90,000. It's like maybe a 2x away from that. But you also have to consider maybe there's some part of the wealth that you cannot even liquidate. Maybe there's like 401k lockup or like whatever going on. So right now, I would say 50% based on the data that I'm seeing, 50% of the people in the USA, if they're really passionate about it and they're really convinced about it, they could still get to 1 Bitcoin.
That's what I was going to say. You could still do it.
Is very rapidly closing.
Oh yes, and it's gonna soon. I mean, The institutions got the green light by the government. The current administration is very friendly, of course, towards Bitcoin. We see, headlines all the time. We see the news, and we watch all the Twitter channels where have their eyes 24/7 on news, from any source at all from Bitcoin news. So we're always getting that new news, but we never see what's behind the scenes, what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, Fidelity is open about it. BlackRock they manage $13 trillion in wealth, asset under management for the whole world. 13 trillion is more than a lot of nations are worth, right? So can you imagine how the banks are developing infrastructure, digital infrastructure to start custodying Bitcoin for people? Once they do that, it's game over.
Absolutely. It's really interesting, but we started in hot. Maybe for the few people that not know you, that haven't seen the first episode with you, because you are one of the few returning guests. Maybe give people some background of like who you are and why you're in general excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Gus Henry. It's my first and middle name. My mom brought me to America when I was 10 years old. And I've never thought I'd be this wealthy, and of course spiritually, but also physically, in the sense that only Bitcoin can give this opportunity to people. My mom used to make $15,000 a year. We came from American standards poverty, American standards. Of course, it's not poverty in America. People who say that they're poor in America, it's cute compared to some third world countries. Europe and America, we're very fortunate to live here. But basically, I grew up and worked with roofing. I've done restaurants. I dropped out of high school, proudly so. I hated high school. Last time we talked about this. And I went to work for a roofing company and did part-time in a little market bodega store. And I met many people, talked to many people. I love people, I love people so much that eventually I went to work for an ambulance service. And then during the pandemic, I don't want to nuke your channel. During the thing that happened, and the major thing that happened in 2020, my friends came over with a huge grill. I mean, they showed up, my childhood friends. It was a surprise for me. I was really excited. I had bought my house at that time. It had been 2 years I had bought my house. We did a beautiful barbecue here. It was a bunch of people. And then we made a pact. We made a covenant. Diogo, who was always being very responsible with his money. He was working when he was like 14, lying about his age just to work to help his mom pay the bills. He's amazing, Diogo Colucci. He made us all download Robinhood, and we were all into it because he's like, let's retire early. Let's let's make $1 million. We're going to be millionaires. And then we all made a pact to invest $100 every week. Now, when I was scrolling through Robinhood and find out what should I invest in, I came across this thing called Bitcoin. And I noticed that it went from $20,000 to $65,000 in a period of a couple of months. I'm like, what is this? And I remember from 2018 when I was in the pizzeria, I had heard about it on the TV and I shrugged it off. It was 2018. Man, if I could have bought some Bitcoin there. But ever since then, I started studying Bitcoin. I joined Twitter, X, and Bitcoin Twitter X. Please, guys, make an account. Join X and follow as many Bitcoin accounts as you can. The Bitcoin people are very, very helpful. They help you with anything. Be careful of scammers, of course, just like anywhere. Even, you get text messages with scammers all the time, but join Bitcoin Twitter and talk to the people. They'll guide you through. But anyways, X helped me get a node. I have a Bitcoin node. I run actually more than a couple of them. I have, never put your eggs in one basket. I always have a few wallets that you spread with multi-sigs and you memorize it and you have it stamped in steel. But yeah, so that's a little bit of my background. I basically worked in the ambulance service and cleaning houses for the past 9 years, but the past 5 years I've been stacking sats and I haven't looked back. I haven't stopped. It's even more addicting, and Bitcoin is the thing you fall in love with. Things fade away. Your addiction or your love for things fade away with time. Bitcoin, the more you know Bitcoin, the more you fall in love with it, the deeper the rabbit hole gets. And people there's no such thing as a Bitcoin expert. Even Andrea Antonopoulos said this, and he's just a complete, he's the expert, right? But even then, he doesn't call himself an expert. So the more you know Bitcoin, it's getting to the point now that I made a goal to study C++, to get to know a little bit about coding and see how Bitcoin's made. But the more you get to know Bitcoin, the more of its beauties it improves your life. It completely changes your life. I mean, it's going to make you physically wealthy. According to world standards, you're going to be super wealthy. Your net worth is going to 10x, 20x, 25x. And yes, you're still early. Oh, but Bitcoin is still 100, it's 105,000. It's done. No, it's going to go to 1 million, and then it's going to go to 10 million. Satoshi predicted this. It's absolute scarce. And when people tell me they think that Bitcoin is related to Bitcoin, I just ask them, will the banksters, will the governments stop printing money? The answer is no. And there's only 21 million Bitcoin forever. So that's what I tell people. You are early to Bitcoin. Even if it's 5 years from now, you're early to Bitcoin.
Isn't it just today where Donald Trump said, I agree with Elizabeth Warren that we have to raise the debt limit and print a bunch of money? Isn't that the only thing that they agree on, that they have to print more money?
Dude, I couldn't believe my eyes last night. When I got home from Costco, I was scrolling through, and Eden Simeka, you had him on because I told Simeka that you're a really cool podcast, and he came on. I was like, Adam, is this real? I thought it was fake. I thought it was AI generated. People love the clickbaity stuff. No, it's real. So both the extreme right and the extreme left in America agree that we should print money forever.
It's the one thing that is probably more true than the sun going up and you're breathing and natural laws. It's like they will print more money, and that's why Bitcoin will always go up in US dollar terms. It's so funny for me when I say like 0.1 Bitcoin will be a lot of money one day. I never put a timeline on there. I never say like, at 2035 or anything like that, because it will be true. 0.1 Bitcoin will be so freaking much. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 100 years, maybe in 200 years. I don't know the timeline. It's impossible to predict. But if they keep printing money, and Bitcoin is the standard, and there's just 21 million Bitcoin, 1/10 of a Bitcoin will be so freaking much that you won't even believe it. Maybe at the point where I'm already dead, like, okay, maybe it takes longer than I think. That can be happening. I think it will be a lot faster than most people think. But I don't want to do predictions on like timelines, because I think it's just impossible to know.
No, you can't.
But I would encourage everyone to be very like. Look at your current Bitcoin view and 10x the bullishness of yourself, because then maybe you are at a good enough level. It's like,
absolutely.
I had CK on recently, and he is really famous for saying like nobody's bullish enough on Bitcoin. He's like, why am I the guy saying that? Because it's like such an easy thing to say. Nobody's bullish enough on Bitcoin. Like we never had the opportunity of what Bitcoin really is.
Yeah. This is why I'm so excited about podcasts like yours, man. I really appreciate it. When you reached out to me over a year ago to be in your podcast, I'm like, oh, this ought to be fun, I every time I do this podcast with you, it's so much fun to ponder over these things, because most of us in our everyday lives, we don't know other Bitcoiners, people don't usually talk about it. A lot of Bitcoiners are actually quiet about it because you're afraid of getting the $5 range attack, which is totally understandable, especially in Europe where you can't own guns. But I was very excited about your podcast, and I'm still am very bullish on podcasts like yours, because eventually the masses are going to flock to your channel. It's happening. Simply Bitcoin is seeing it. Bitcoin for Millennials, I went to his podcast. It's a really cool dude, Bram. I loved the podcast you guys did together. I really enjoyed it, you and Bram. What a dynamic duo. You guys should have a show together. But it's people are going to flock into your channels, and they're going to consume. They're going to get addicted to your content, especially you. You interview like average, everyday people, and I hope we can make this a thing. Like every year, if you could have me back, I'd love that, just to get updates and stuff. But you have people from all walks of life. Just like that's how Joe Rogan made it to be 15 million downloads every episode. He interviewed his friends. He interviewed people he knew. He interviewed people who were experts in certain niches, and this is why the masses will flock to your channel. It's happening now. Once I think, I used to think that, and in a way, Bitcoin did have the grassroots from bottom to the top. Now I feel like it's meeting halfway. So the adoption started in 2010, 2011, 2012. It started from the bottom up. But now I feel like the Bitcoin adoption is coming from the institutions, right? It seems like it's stalled here with retail and everyday people. And now it seems that BlackRock, Fidelity, Citigroup, it's coming all from the top. And then the Trumps are now, apparently, by the way, Trump won't shut up about Bitcoin. So Trump is his son has said it multiple times. My dad's a Bitcoin maxi. How true is that? I don't know, but I believe it. He won't shut up about Bitcoin, and he is telling all his billionaire friends about it. Everybody knows Trump. Trump is, he's a socialite. He knows a lot of people. Not to mention Scaramucci and the people from the Shark Tank. Most of them love Bitcoin. So it's spreading throughout the culture. So eventually all the masses are going to come to Bitcoin education. They'll need it. It's very, very tough when I first found Bitcoin. That's why I tell people join Bitcoin X, because people will help you. Wicked's Mod Bitcoin. There's so many channels that you can get a lot of information from, and people who say, the main message that I would have, if you're watching this in a year from now, 2 years from now, the main message that I have is Bitcoin only, because Bitcoin had the Immaculate Conception. Bitcoin, nobody knows who Satoshi is. He never moved his coins. There was no ICO, initial coin offering or initial public offering. There was no early investors like Ethereum. Ethereum had a small group of people who keeps dumping on retail, and they'll do it forever because they're multi-billionaires because they gave themselves the coins, and then that's the pre-mine. They don't even do the work for it. No, Satoshi Nakamoto worked for his million coins, and he's never moved them. So we think he's either dead or he lost his keys, or people have different theories about it, but his coins have never moved. At this point, it's never going to move. What human can control himself like this? He probably lost his keys, or they. And Bitcoin only because it is the immaculately conceived, scarce asset. Some people make some arguments for privacy coins. I'm not pro that, but just stick to Bitcoin. It's the only thing that you will ever need. It's the only had a fair launch. He didn't even have a launch, but Bitcoin is the only way to get out of from the bankster's thumb.
100%. It spreads like wildfire. And I think, was it you? I think you brought this Bitcoin is fire comparison in last time. Maybe I'm wrong. If I remember correctly, I think you mentioned how Bitcoin is fire and how Bitcoin is such an invention like fire. Can you remember if that was you? Maybe.
Yes. I mentioned a lot. So Bitcoin is akin to fire. The wheel, and that's what I said last time. I think that's what you're remembering. Bitcoin is akin to the internet, to flight. Bitcoin is it's a discovery. I don't think it's an invention, because Bitcoin has always existed. It's digital scarcity. Matter can neither be created nor destroyed. Matter is energy. Energy is matter. E equals mc squared. It's obvious. It's a law of physics, and the laws of thermodynamics dictate. And Bitcoin is just the discovery of digital scarcity. So it is a ledger, an immutable ledger in cyberspace. It is trustless, permissionless. It can be it can be used by anyone, anywhere, can be sent across across the earth, the speed of light through layer twos, and it is immutable. It is uninflatable. The banksters can't inflate it. The politicians cannot manipulate it, right? We have this trouble in society where politicians are all corrupt, right? Doesn't matter if you're in Nigeria, doesn't matter if you're in Russia, doesn't matter if you're in China, doesn't matter if you're in the United States, doesn't matter if you're in Brazil. You can mention all 200 countries. Doesn't matter where you are. Politicians are snakes, they're liars, they'll work for the people who pay them the most. Bitcoin is incorruptible and unmanipulable by them. So it doesn't matter. They can't promise, all right, BlackRock, if you give me $1 billion, that's what they have backdoor deals all the time. People, plebs don't know. Most people don't know, but Elizabeth Warren is taking money from the banks. Trump is taking money from giant pharmaceutical companies. He's never going to be anti-establishment in a way. People think that he is a bull in a china shop in the sense that he is destroying modern day politics, the status quo, but he's still the very much the establishment itself. But the point is that nobody can manipulate Bitcoin. Bitcoin is unmanipulable. Politicians can't stop it. They can't alter it. They can't inflate it. They can't manipulate it. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin, is that when you take a piece of that Bitcoin, only 21 million forever, you take a piece of that Bitcoin, it's yours to keep. And try getting gold across borders, right? Oh, I don't need to go across borders. Well, you're not in Ukraine. You're not in Russia. You're not in China. You're not in North Korea, right? You're not oppressed, in the Western countries. We have such good lives, man. I always remind friends and family, we're so privileged. And I hate to use that word. We are so privileged. I have family, from all colors, religions, and background. I have family from, my both sides of my family. From my mother's side, they all mostly married other Italian people. From my father's side, they intermixed with, Native American Indians. They intermixed with Black people. They intermixed, and it's such a beautiful family. I have cousins from all colors and backgrounds. And I'm telling you, third world countries are a terror, a horror. If you think your politicians are corrupt, third world country politicians, they are the worst. And they take all of their constituents' money, all the voters' money. They have backdoor deals where they pretty much sell the country to enrich their pockets. So Bitcoin is a way for the plebeian, for the working class to say, enough. This is my money. You cannot take this away from me. And even if they try, they cannot take it away from you, because you just got to memorize 12 to 24 words. And that's it. You're free to go anywhere you want. And you're free to move to a jurisdiction that's going to be friendly towards you, right? If you're being oppressed in North Korea, well, take your stuff and go. If you're living in Ukraine and there's war, take your stuff and go. If you're living in Russia and you're a homosexual, for example, take your stuff and go. If you're a Jew in Nazi Germany, take your stuff and go. That's Bitcoin. That's the power that Bitcoin gives you. And when people realize this, they're going to flock to Bitcoiners' channels because they'll need the education that you provide.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. Most people realize that way too late. If you have Bitcoin, you have to have a self-custody hardware wallet. But what are you doing if that hardware wallet breaks? Yeah, you wrote your seed phrase on paper. What if that paper is just dissolving or water is spilled on top of it? Paper is very non-durable. So you have to have a fire resistant, water resistant, and impact proof method of securing your seed phrase so you can back up your keys. And to do that, you should use a solid titanium plate from Stampseed. Go to stampseed.com and use code Robin to get not 5 or 10, but 15% off your Stampseed. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. Do you think do you think we are now officially kind of in this then they join you phase where governments are now, I mean, we have the president talking about Bitcoin conferences, we have the vice president going to Bitcoin conferences. Is this the slow move from like tyranny to like sovereignty in a state where they kind of see they cannot fight it, so like you might as well just join it?
Yeah, I can picture it too. It's the opposite of a centralized system. It's Bitcoin is like a magnet that's spreading the centralization into a decentralized world, and things are getting more equitable, and the equality of opportunity will be there for everybody. A true meritocracy will exist. Bitcoin is causing such a wide change and improvement to the world that historians and people who study sociology, anthropology, archaeology, technological innovations, people who are academics who spend their lives studying humanity and studying the progression of history, they're going to be baffled. Their minds are going to be blown by, when there is a large group of people, and I think Bitcoiners now, we are a large group of people. We are a huge community, right? It started with 12 people in a cypherpunk group chat, right, in a forum. And it then went to dozens of people, and then eventually to hundreds of people. And of course, it seems trivial, but it spread so quickly. It spread so much through the entirety of the world. Bitcoin is in every nation state, inside every jurisdiction of every nation state in the world. Every language group has seen or touched or heard of Bitcoin. So people need to think, is there something there that I'm missing? People who, like me, when in 2018, I was in a pizzeria and I was about to close the pizzeria with my boss. Him and I were looking at the TV. Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. I don't even remember what they were saying. I just remember Bitcoin, and, they were just talking about Bitcoin. And it was time for me to close the restaurant, though. So I went like, whatever. I turned around and left. Had I been like, wait a minute, maybe they have a point. What is this Bitcoin thing? I should look into it. If I Googled that, I could have got money from the money spigot remember the money spigot back in the days that you just would visit the site, for people who don't know, and the money spigot would give you a couple Bitcoins, like 1 or 2 Bitcoins, depending, so people, and I think households, if you look at Nigeria, the adoption there is on fire. It's up to, out of 10 people in Nigeria, 6 own Bitcoin. And of course, it's mostly the youth. It's mostly younger people, right? But also the people who are millennials and Gen Xers and Gen Zers, they are coming to the conclusion of the truth, because it's true that government's corrupt, government sucks at everything, government's going to continue to steal from you. Well, how do they steal from us? Well, not only by briberies and political backdoor deals, by selling your natural resources, but they also steal through inflation. They print money that you have to work for, that I have to work for. Well, I don't work for that money anymore. I immediately changed my fiat into Satoshi, so I work for Bitcoin. They print the money that you have to use. And that's what Nigerians are coming to the conclusion of. They're like, wait a minute, you're just printing this money? No, I don't want it. And so they go and they buy Bitcoin, and the government initially was like, no, ban Bitcoin. And then they saw how stupid that term is, ban Bitcoin. It's impossible. You can shut off the on and off ramps, but there's this guy, one of many, but there's this guy called Ray Noans. He made this application in Africa. It's called No One's App. No One's App. And people will exchange goods and services and buy Bitcoin through a peer-to-peer decentralized way. So even if every African government banned Bitcoin, which is impossible, right? They shut the on and off ramps. CivKit Ray from No One's will get Bitcoin into your hands, because it's speech. It's unbannable. The founding fathers in America knew that they couldn't ban speech, so they weren't even going to try. It's unbannable, right? That's what Bitcoin is. It's speech. It's code. It's written speech that people are going to get a hold of. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. That Bitcoin is the discovery of digital scarcity, and it's giving the power back to the people from the tyrants. It's over. The time's over for the tyrants. Thank God.
There's one concern of mine. It's not a big concern, but it's something that I notice. We have currently a shift in a lot of institutional adoption, and retail is kind of sleeping. We have more of this talk of like, hey, don't sell your Bitcoin, but borrow against it. You just give your Bitcoin to institutions and you get some fiat money for that. And you end up with an IOU again, and the Bitcoin is against its institutional, at some institutional vault. Is there something where you think like we're growing? Like there's always like we are growing, we're getting more mature. Obviously, institutions coming in. Obviously, financial products will be built around Bitcoin. But is there any concern that this growing and maturing might end up that we kind of lose that freedom and sovereignty and the original kind of cypherpunk Bitcoin ethos in there?
Yeah, I think it's bound to happen. As for example, Seyr talked about this in details. Grandpa, for example, he is 78 years old. I'm just making up a generic grandpa for people. He's 78 years old. He's not going to learn how to use Sparrow, right? He's just going to go like this. Hello, Fidelity? Can you please buy $50,000 of Bitcoin for me? And then thus paper Bitcoin is born, which is that, I was actually thinking this 2 days ago in the ambulance service when I had some downtime. I was walking around the station there, and I was thinking, man, how much paper Bitcoin is there? And it's kind of scary to think. I see what you're saying, it is kind of scary to think, but eventually, just like the thing that happened to FTX, they had a ton of paper Bitcoin. And then when they were caught red-handed, the market dumped to $16,000. And what people don't understand about that is that Bitcoiners are happy when it dumps that much, Is it going to dump soon? Because, we're going to have like a sailor, a sailor, are we going to find out that he has a ton of paper Bitcoin because he didn't want to do proof of reserves? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, it is possible. Even if it does happen, and I was looking for the word scandal. Even if there's a major scandal, and we find out half of MicroStrategy's Bitcoin or paper Bitcoin, yeah, the price will dump. 50K, 58K, and then it's just going to go up because the value, let's use the word intrinsic. The intrinsic value of Bitcoin is absolute. It is objective. It is embedded in the laws of physics and thermodynamics. Digital scarcity. Will it go down eventually? Yes, it will a little bit, even if there's a paper Bitcoin scandal. But it's gonna rage bump with the revenge. Do you remember, man, when 2022, when we were like around, it was like 15K. The lowest was 16,500, and then we got to 25. And then everyone was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna wait to buy." People like Gareth Soloway, we'll buy when it's 8,000, and then it rage pumped to like 34,000, and then everyone's like, "All right, guys, this is it." And the next 2-3 years, we are about 3 years after that, but in 2 years, we saw Bitcoin going to all-time highs, $80,000. Right? It was so fun, and in a way, I was sad because I'm never going to be able to buy Bitcoin for $50,000 again. So I cherish every moment of when I DCA'd for low amounts like that. So in a way, will we ever have a paper Bitcoin scandal? I hope so, because then I can buy more cheap sats.
Yeah, this year we can see it. It was around the November,
Yes.
December 2022 era where we had the 16,000, and man, we were ready. I was ready to go down to 5,000. I was like, let's do this shit. Like let's get some Bitcoin under 10K.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it never happened.
Amazing, man. Can you believe? Look at that. And I honestly think, if you ask me, I honestly think we're never going back. We're never going to see $70,000 again. And people are saying, "Oh, we're gonna jinx us." I hope so. I want lower. I want to buy cheaper satoshis. So I don't think we're ever gonna see. You see how Bitcoin is holding now above 100,000, right? It's holding steadily because Fidelity, Citigroup, they're all buying it. JP Morgan Chase, they're now custodying Bitcoin. Jamie Dimon said, "I hate Bitcoins, those damn Bitcoins." Jamie Dimon always talks about Bitcoin as a digital money laundering scheme. Whatever, Grandpa, you just go eat your tapioca and take a nap. And what is he said now? A couple of weeks ago, he said, "We're now custodying Bitcoin for our clients." Why is he doing that? He's not doing that out of the goodness of his heart. He hates Bitcoin. It's because billionaires were getting on the phone and saying, "Jamie, I've been your client for 20 years. I'm going to leave you if you don't let me custody Bitcoin." So he's like, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir." And now he's talking about, because people are obviously catching him on his lies, he is custodying Bitcoin for his clients. So it's coming. It's here. It's already here. Institutions are not coming. They're here. And it's going to spread faster and faster. If I hope, I love America. I'm an American. Like I've told you before, I've been here since I was 10 years old. I really hope, wish, and pray that Trump and the Wyoming Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis, she's a huge Bitcoiner. We love her in Bitcoin. Thank you, Cynthia Lummis. If you ever watch this by chance, we love you very much. She has a bill that will make the United States Treasury buy and hodl 1 million Bitcoins. If that passes, there's going to be such a huge supply shock, because when people see, we say, in the economics world, we say when America sneezes, the world catches a cold, because everybody looks to America. Like it or not, for better or for worse, everybody's looking to America because of our stable government, and Europe in a way too. So when America does something and Europe does something, everybody follows suits. All the third world countries like Brazil, and these are not small countries. I'm talking about countries with 210 million, 250 million, Indonesia. We're talking about India, for example, Pakistan. I think Pakistan has a good 100, over 100 million. Nigeria now, that the population, their growth is booming. So eventually when America starts hodling Bitcoin, all the other governments are going to do it. And Trump already gave everybody the green light. So I think, Robin, it's happening as we speak.
It's fair true. It's already there. I just want to mention that because you brought it up with Paper Bitcoin and strategy. I really I have very high doubt that he is doing that because like FTX was an offshore thing, like it was not like an SEC approved thing or something like that. And I do believe that like look at the incentive that Seyr has to do real paper Bitcoin. Yeah, of course, like you can make an argument it's paper Bitcoin because like it lays with Coinbase and with like other custodians. He does not own the keys. Like he's not running around with like keys for 500,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
If you count that as paper Bitcoin, yeah, most of the institutions have paper Bitcoin, but he actually bought them. And if he would lie about that, he could face prison.
Yeah.
For what upside? Like,
he's not going to do it.
What would he gain from that?
Nothing.
It's hilarious when people bring it up. So like, yeah, it's weird that he doesn't do the proof of reserve, but there's probably a lot of reasons that are not public for exactly that. And we probably never really know. But yeah, the security risks might be legit. Like I'm not clever enough to judge that actually. Like I've never run a public traded company, and I think nobody should judge that if they haven't run a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
And think like, oh, like it's easy to judge someone if you haven't walked in his shoes. But I want to highlight something that you've said, and I think it's really interesting. You've said you heard Bitcoin and you have not really paid attention, and you don't even know what they said. And it's interesting because I think every Bitcoin mention is good for Bitcoin. Like probably most likely they said weird things about Bitcoin in the TV. Like it probably wasn't like a Bitcoin podcast where like they had like positive things about Bitcoin. They're like, oh, like the price crashed or the price goes up, like whatever. So every mention, even if it's in the worst possible form, even if Jamie Dimon is saying like, oh, like Bitcoin is bad, or like Warren Buffett is like Bitcoin is rat poison, or all of those things. Those are points for people to remember, and the only real thing they remember is like Bitcoin. And at some point they have a good connection with Bitcoin, as you had later on, and they're like, oh, I remember Bitcoin. I heard it like a year ago from Warren Buffett, and 2 years ago from Jamie Dimon, and 3 years ago from a random channel. I have no clue what they actually really said about Bitcoin, but I remember that name. And that's the big play. That's the thing that Bitcoin haters don't get. And I told that story, I think, like at least like 5 times already in the podcast. But I was in university for like a very short amount of time. And one of the classes was an IT security introductionary class. Had nothing to do with Bitcoin, but the first class he did was on IT security and encryption. So he could mention Bitcoin, but he doesn't have to mention Bitcoin. And he not only mentioned Bitcoin, he actually dumped on Bitcoin a lot. He's like, oh, it's too centralized, like the miners all in China. And like he mentioned some weird arguments like that, which at the time was actually still true, but like no longer now. But the interesting thing is like he could choose to not mention it at all, but he chose to introduce Bitcoin to every student in that university. In a bad way, yeah, granted. But if you introduce it to like 1,000 people, there's at least like 5 people that are like, oh, like, let me Google that Bitcoin. Like, why is he mentioning it? Like, why are we hearing about a cryptocurrency in an encryption course? That is a little bit weird. I just want to hear about IT security. I don't want to. I'm not in the finance class here. So every mention of Bitcoin, every advertisement for Bitcoin, be it good or bad, I think it's very good for Bitcoin, and overall will increase adoption because there's already so much good material online there available.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the thing. Every publicity is good publicity, even if it's bad publicity in a way, even if it's somebody like your university professor trashing Bitcoin, it's good because, like you said, out of 1,000 people, even if 15 people look it up, 5 of those 1,000 people are going to say, wait a minute, there's something to this. And they start studying it more and more, and then again, they'll hear it mentioned over there and they'll hear it mentioned over there. I always like to bring up the example of Venmo. So Venmo is and it ties back to this. It's an application where you can just send your friends money. It's pretty much it. You can pay your guy, you can pay your mom, you can exchange goods and services. Venmo is just, it's a way for you to pay people without using cash. And everybody in America, if you're in America, Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, it's the same thing kind of. And I remember one day being in the ambulance station and one of our coworkers say, hey guys, we're getting pizza. I'm like, okay, I want to pitch in. I don't have any cash though. Can I get you later? I'll go to the ATM and print it, whatever, bring it and give it to you. And he said, oh, just use Venmo. And I'm like, what? What is that? I never heard about Venmo before in my life. And apparently everybody had Venmo. My mom had Venmo. Come to find out, my cousins have Venmo. How did I not? Maybe I heard about it and didn't pay attention, but how did I not know what Venmo was? Of course, I immediately downloaded it because everybody's using it. It's much easier now. It makes life more simpler. My pest control guy comes in. I'm like, oh, can I just Venmo you? I don't have any cash. Your friend does an errand for you and you want to give him some gas money. Just Venmo him. It's so much easier. It's obvious. It's the obvious next step for human society. When people see, when people who study this subject see that there's a small group of people literally printing the money, and even worse, sometimes they don't even print because there's no proof of work and not printing. They just type numbers on a screen. Federal Reserve balance sheet. The United States has another $1 trillion in circulation. When people realize that there's a small group of people printing the money that you and I have to work for, people are going to flock. Again, it always comes back to Bitcoin. People are going to flock to Bitcoin because they're going to look for hard money. They're going to look for an asset that cannot be printed, manipulated, inflated. And that's Bitcoin. It's a ledger in cyberspace that says, Gus, like if I ever go to Austria and you let me stay in your couch, I give you 500,000 Satoshis. The Bitcoin ledger just says Gus gave Robin, and it's doing these calculations 24/7. And we're up to, we went so high that we changed the numericals for the hash rate, So when people realize this, they're going to flock to Bitcoin. There is no ifs, ands, or buts.
My couch is free for you, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Come to Austria. The couch is not huge, but it's definitely free for you.
I appreciate it, man. I'm honestly looking at a good real estate in the Alps somewhere, where Italy borders with Austria. And my wife and I are always looking at real estate, and it's so tough because when you have the Bitcoin, you're like, man, I really want this house, but that the house is when you buy the house, it's going to deteriorate and the house is going to get old. And Bitcoin is hard money. Bitcoin never gets old. It never deteriorates. It only increases in value. So every time you want to buy something, you're like, but eventually we're going to make the move for sure. And then we'll have an in-person podcast, hopefully.
I would love that, man. Like, even if you're in Italy, I'll come visit you in Italy, and it's no, like, it's so close.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that. I think we already talked about it 1 year ago.
Yeah.
I hope we can already talk about in person about it in 1 year, maybe in 2 years, whatever the time frame is. I'm really looking forward to that. How has actually Bitcoin impacted your life? Now you have it a long time. You're really deep into it. You have a truly good understanding of Bitcoin also? You're not just like having Bitcoin, but you also really understand the mission behind it?
Yeah, it impacted my life in a way that is immeasurable, right? My parents, you know, are from Brazil, and in Brazil, it's very hard to make a living. And the money there is worth 5 times less than the US dollar. Literally, $1 is 5 Brazilian reais. And so it's very hard. People like in Austria, like in America, their main savings account is their house, right? They'll buy a house and they'll pay the bank every month the mortgage, and that's how they accrue their value. And then one day when they're 80, they die and they leave that asset for the children, and the children will divide. If you have three children or four children, they'll divide them equally amongst themselves, right? And that's the main way average people in Brazil, Nigeria, wherever, anywhere in the world, that's the way they have their savings account. And so I've never thought I would be, this wealthy. And I say that with a lot of reverence and respect to God, and a lot of gratitude to America, but also mostly gratitude towards Satoshi Nakamoto for discovering digital scarcity. It's like if you have an iron log, or if you have an iron or a mining business, a literal physical ore mining business back in the 1900s, early 1900s. And this man called Henry Ford makes this thing called a truck. You're going to be very grateful to them, because now you don't have to have 50 horses. All of a sudden, you can just buy the truck, the Ford, and you can put a bunch of iron ore in the back of that truck. And that's just kind of a silly example, because trucks and cars and motorized vehicle are used for literally everything, right? For all types of exchanging of goods and services and producing goods. But you'd be very thankful for that man named Henry Ford. And like Michael Saylor says, when somebody discovers something really important, you're not going to say, screw you, and then Michael Saylor goes on to say, oh, what is that, fire? May I borrow some of that fire, sir? And thank you. You show gratitude. So that's the sort of respect I have to Satoshi, to America, for giving me this wonderful opportunity. So Bitcoin changed my life in countless ways, because I used to be worried and afraid all the time. What if I pass away? What if something happens to me? How are my children going to make a living? Well, Bitcoin is taking care of that for me. Even if my heart stops right now, my children will have enough money to pay off the house. They'll buy a car cash. They'll be able to buy a second home, maybe. That's the power that Bitcoin gives you. Oh, but you're lucky. You were early. No. You were still early. Bitcoin is going to do another 5x. It's going to do another 10x. Bitcoin is going to 10 million. Bitcoin is going to 50 million. And it again goes back to that. How am I so certain that Bitcoin is going up forever? I asked the question to the normie. Will governments and banksters ever stop printing money? The answer is no. They'll never stop printing money. And it's funny, because it's the power they used to have that they flexed for us. They flexed. I have the power to print money. You listen to me. You pay taxes. Give me back my money. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. When the disciples of Jesus said, Lord, when are you going to overthrow this Roman regime? Basically through taxation. Jesus said, no fighting. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. So we as Christians have an obligation to pay taxes. But what we didn't see coming is that the money that Caesar uses to control the empire is rapidly rotting. This is why I do think that America will FOMO into Bitcoin, and the world will follow suit. It's going to happen. We couldn't even dream of BlackRock buying almost 1 million Bitcoins out. We couldn't even dream of a person like Michael Saylor putting all of his cash into and his company's net worth into Bitcoin. We couldn't even dream of Citigroup or JP Morgan Chase custodying Bitcoin for their clients, but it happened, and it's happening. We couldn't even dream of having a president who's so pro Bitcoin. Trump won't shut up about Bitcoin. That's what people around him say. Trump will always talk about Bitcoin. So it not only is happening as we speak, but it's going to continue to happen. And eventually, of course, the fiat ruler will break. So Bitcoin will be the only denominator. So this is why we say Bitcoin is repricing everything, because one day everything will be priced in Bitcoin. There's $900 trillion of assets on Earth, real estate, you name it, cars and goods and services and gold and stocks and bonds, 900 trillion. Bitcoin only has about 3 trillion of those 900 trillion. What Bitcoiners are saying, what Satoshi said initially, is that all of those 900 trillion will flow into Bitcoin and all fiats on Earth will break. Will it happen in our lifetime? I don't know, possibly, but Bitcoin will reprice everything. So this is why I tell people, you are early. You are very early. So buy Bitcoin. It's going to change your life.
This is very, very wise of you. It's very true also. I have one question. I'm really curious what you say. I have one question for each and every one of my guests that comes back on the show. The question is, what have you learned since you have last been on the podcast outside of Bitcoin?
I've learned more things about medicine, working with different paramedics and, taking different people with different ailments to the hospital and taking care of people. I've learned that there is more hope than one thinks. I've learned to be more positive. I've learned that the law of attraction is real. I've learned that if you're a positive person and you think positive and you pray positive and you hope, wish, and pray, and you emit that positive energy to the universe is going to emit it back to you. And same for negativity. If you are angry all the time, you're mean, you're rude, you're disrespectful, you're always yelling at people, the universe is going to throw that back at you. We are the universe is us. The universe is just echoing who you are to yourself. So when you're really nice and polite and loving and kind and compassionate, people are going to miss you when you're not around. People are going to emit that energy back. And I do believe that's what I learned. And that's what I learned since last time, but also I'm comprehending it more and more every day, because I think we grow. Our understanding about something grows every day. That's why we need to ponder and meditate on certain things that will make our life more useful and better.
I love that. That's beautiful. It's something like, oh, you learn, you go ahead and you adapt, and then you learn more about the same things basically, and you're trying to get a little bit wide of circles, and you're like, oh, this is true, oh, this is not true, and through this continuous learning, if you look back like 5 years, you're like, oh shit, like I didn't know anything about that like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And this continuous learning is like so interesting to witness. So it will be really fun also to see, and I will have this podcast all my life. So it will be fun to see if we do an episode in, let's say, 20 years from now and see like what you have said there.
Wow.
and how is it in 20 years.
I want to do that. We'll definitely do it, man. God willing, we'll do it.
I would love that. I have to first keep it up and keep my word that I do it all my life. And then in 20 years we can we have to do that. Thank you so much, Gus, for being such a gracious guest on my show. Before I let you go, I almost forgot. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. It's an interesting question. The previous guest asked you, what must happen in order for you to sell Bitcoin for another asset?
Wow, that's a huge question, huh? Yeah. I would say, God forbid, a health scare. I'm not selling Bitcoin. I will live in a cardboard box with my children, and I will feed them. I will find food. I will trap meat. I will grow. I'm a very good gardener. I will feed my children, but I will not sell my Bitcoin. So I think what would happen for me to actually sell my Bitcoin for some fiat, it would be a health scare, you know.
I love that. It's a good one, because this is like your life's energy and health and time is the only thing more valuable than the Bitcoin itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
For being such a gracious guest. Where can people find you? Where can people reach out to you?
It's at Scavacini777 on Twitter X. It's at, the Twitter handle for people those who don't know. Scavacini is Scavani, Scavacini. Sorry, Ni. Yeah, Scavacini. Sorry, I'm not.
I'll put it in the description.
Thank you so much. You can put it in the I guess in the YouTube whatchamacallit description. Thank you so much. I'm humbled. Exactly. Robin, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gus. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.